Congressman Dan Kildee's a Democrat of Michigan. He sits on the House Ways and Means Committee, which obtained Donald Trump's tax returns, and he joins me now. I guess first my question, Congressman, is did you think this day would actually come?
Well, it was a long time coming. First of all, thanks again for having me back on the show. You know, we started soon after Democrats took control of the House to begin to look at the big questions that had gone unanswered. This was a big one. It was in April of that year that Chairman Neal sent the letter. We expected President Trump and the entire administration to push back and to use delay tactics. After all, that has been his method in just about every aspect of his business enterprises, to delay, to try to outweight people on the other side of the negotiating table. I was just grateful that ultimately the Supreme Court ruled in this case in time for us to finish our work before Republicans take control. I don't want to project what they may do, but my expectation is that they'll continue to defend Donald Trump. I was suspecting we never get to it, and I was really pleased that we were able to finally get to this.
So I want to get into a little bit of the substance, but before we get there, first of all, let's talk about Charles Rettig. He's the individual who ran the IRS. He was appointed by Donald Trump. He quite famously wrote a defense of Donald Trump not releasing his taxes during the campaign, when that's a standard thing candidates do. And we should note here that presidents do it and have been doing it going back decades. It's a standard thing presidents show. It's an important thing for transparency's sake. I feel like I got a lot of questions about Charles Rettig, having learned of the fact that in violation, I think, of federal law, his agency had not audited Donald Trump while he was the head of the IRS. Do you have some questions for him?
We do have a lot of questions. And just to be clear, it has been the practice of the IRS since 1977, when they put into their own operating manuals the mandatory audit of the president of the United States. But it hasn't been a law, and that's one of the reasons that we sought this inquiry in the first place, to determine what and to what extent we may need to take action legislatively to do what we all thought the IRS had been doing all along. Our suspicion was he was not being audited by the IRS. And of course, our suspicions were proven to be the case. Those questions go directly to Mr. Rettig. Why didn't he do his job? Why didn't he do what the IRS operating manual requires? And of course, that's a question that we can speculate about. We hope to be able to get to some of these answers at some point in time. But it is curious to note that during the entire presidency of Barack Obama, his tax returns were audited annually. President Biden's tax returns, since President Trump has left, audited. That 4-year period when Donald Trump was president, it wasn't until the Ways and Means Committee opened our inquiry that they even began the process of audit, and never completed a single audit of Donald Trump when he was president of the United States. There's a reason for that. And I think we can speculate as to what that reason might be. We don't have facts to confirm it, but it is a curiosity that only during the 4 years of the Trump presidency, when Donald Trump, with all of his business interests, could have been, significantly manipulating the process, only during that period were those returns not audited.
Yeah, and I just want to restate, thank you for that correction, just to be clear. So I said federal law. It's not federal law. It's IRS policy since 1977 as part of the mandatory, but for the IRS, it's the policies the IRS has, right? So sure. It's not mandated by federal law, but they've been doing it for a very long time, and they're doing it in the aftermath of Nixon, of course, where there's a lot of tax stuff going on. That, that Barack Obama gets audited, Joe Biden gets audited, Donald Trump doesn't. And the cherry on top of this, of course, is that his excuse for not releasing them is precisely he's being audited. And yet it now turns out that it was actually the inverse of the truth, right? That he was like the one president not audited at the time that he was saying that, contrary to every other president, he could not release his tax returns.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it wasn't true that he was being audited when he said it was. Secondly, there's nothing that prohibits any person, right, especially the president of the United States, from releasing their tax returns, even if they're under audit. He claimed that he wanted to be transparent. He clearly did not. And the question is, why not? Is it because, A, there are things in those returns that are questionable, that, at least as I went through the returns, they seemed very questionable to me, or even least case scenario, he was simply embarrassed by the fact that he's a pretty poor businessman. And the only thing he's ever been able to do effectively is inherit money and spend it.
Yeah, that last point about the sort of role the inheritance played, which was a huge part of that incredible New York Times reporting when they got the earlier tax returns, actually shows up again while he's in the presidency. A huge windfall that he gets from Daddy, who is, of course, departed. But even after death, he manages to get that. And it's more money than a lot of the other putative operating businesses are making. Congressman Dan Kildee, who sits on the Ways and Means Committee, which credit where due, got it done under the wire, turning in the paper, 12 hours before the deadline. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Chris. I'd love to have you back to Flint sometime.
I'd love to come back. I had a great time out there. Thank you very much.